don't get in my way. Oh, no, you're all right. It wasn't you. It's the people in the front. You can let me. There you go.
You get it?
Yep. You see on YouTube later.
All I can say is, whoa, wow, what a crowd. Didn't expect this many people. That just shows how important this issue is here in the 3rd District and all across America. People are interested in protecting our Second Amendment rights. And we have been all over the district today. I think this is the 5th stop. And we've had large crowds, but not this many. So I appreciate you guys coming out because it does show here at home in Greenwood County how important this issue is to you. There's an assault, not to use that term wrongly like the administration is doing, but there's an assault on the Second Amendment here in this nation. With what we see with rhetoric, what we see with filed legislation, and also what we see coming out of state legislatures like we see in New York, where they pass very, very restrictive gun legislation, the governor with his rhetoric up there, and what we see here in South Carolina with our legislature supporting the Second Amendment rights. So it's really the whole gamut. But I want you to know that I'm fighting for your Second Amendment rights in Washington, D.C. We see the Dianne Feinstein, thank you. It's something that I personally believe in as much as anything. I believe in a strict interpretation of the Constitution as it's written, not as it's interpreted by others, where they extrapolate or try to make the Constitution say something that it doesn't. The Constitution is written. I carry a copy with me, and I've got the Second Amendment highlighted right there if anybody wants to know what it says. But I think most of the people in this room already know what it says, and they live it and breathe it every day, just like I do, and I'm very appreciative of that. We've got in Washington, we've got Dianne Feinstein, Senator Feinstein filing legislation that is very, very restrictive of your Second Amendment rights. We've got the rhetoric from the administration about executive orders wanting to limit your right to keep and bear arms. We fought back. We were one of the first that really said, be careful with executive orders when it comes to our constitutional rights. You cannot make law with an executive order. You're crossing the line there between executive powers and legislative powers. The United States Congress, as the legislature, is responsible for making laws. The executive branch is responsible for carrying out those laws and enforcing those laws. We live in a constitutional republic, not a dictatorship.
Amen.
And so we're going to be very vigilant thank you. We're going to be very vigilant, looking at the executive orders, making sure they don't cross that line, making sure that they aren't used to water down any of our rights. It's the Second Amendment is the issue today. It could be the First Amendment or the Fourth Amendment tomorrow. And so we have to be very cautious. So my staff and I are reading through the executive orders, making sure they haven't crossed that line. He's gone right up to the line, but he hasn't crossed the line yet. But we want to make sure that the administration, whether it's this administration or any, we want to make sure they don't violate that separation of powers. Our founding fathers were very wise in setting up this government with 3 equal branches of government. Equal branches of government. We don't have a dictatorship. We don't have an oligarchy. We have 3 equal branches of government in this republic, and we also have a republic of 50 states that also have a say-so in their governance. And so we're watching that. We're going to fight the legislation that restricts your freedoms. I've had conversations with Eric Cantor, our majority leader in the House, to make sure that should the Senate pass any sort of Feinstein-type restrictive legislation, that it will never see the light of the House floor in Washington. And I've got that assurance from Eric Cantor. So I'm not too worried about anything coming from the United States Congress as long as I'm there to restrict your gun rights. But we have to make sure that they don't try to do something to circumvent Congress through regulation or executive order. And so this is a listening tour. I came to hear from you guys, not for you to hear from me. And so I'd be glad to take a question. Yes, sir. I've been shooting, so I'm hard of hearing, and I know a lot of you might be as well, so speak up.
I've been trying to get some clarification on just how much power he has under the laws that were passed after 9/11 as far as declaring martial law. Can he do it with an executive order?
The president can declare martial law, but I think certain things have to happen. Not just since 9/11. The president's always had that power. And his executive order on martial law actually wasn't that bad. Actually, it was equal to or even a little less than what was under President Bush, from my understanding. So I'm not that concerned about the martial law language in executive order as it stands today. But there are a lot of concerns about what FEMA's doing, about ammunition purchases, about gun purchases for Department of Homeland Security, ammunition purchases. I know y'all have all heard about that. I serve on the Committee on Homeland Security in Washington and in the House. And just recently I was asked to serve as the chairman of the Oversight Subcommittee, which has oversight responsibility of the Department of Homeland Security. So one thing that I plan on doing is having hearings to look into why they did an RFP, or request for proposal, for that amount of ammunition. What was the purpose? Are they truly changing from a 9mm to a 40 caliber? Certain things, are they changing the way they do things? There are some reasons, legitimate reasons for them to do that. I understand that. I'd love to have them in front of our congressional subcommittee before the American people to answer some of the questions that you have about ammunition purchases, gun purchases, personal use of firearms by Department of Homeland Security folks. There's just a lot of questions along those lines that I'd like to have answered as well. So I plan on doing that from my capacity.
I printed that out for you too. Take with you.
Should Christians be armed? Jesus told his disciples to arm themselves. He who has no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. Luke 22:36. That's great. Nehemiah 4:10 through 20 says that there were people that were rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, and they were being sniped at by their enemies and attacked. And Nehemiah, in his wisdom, put somebody out there with the person rebuilding that wall to guard them and assist them. I look at myself as I'm out there trying to rebuild this country from the rubble it has become. And I know you guys are out there standing with me with the sword and the shield and the mail and the spear, helping me in that process with your prayers, and I certainly will appreciate that. Question?
Is there a way to know if the government is buying up ammunition, buying up raw materials, martial raw materials for ammunition, so that if there's shortage, you can leave it within the city of ammunition? Is there a way to know if the government's actually doing that?
Yeah, we've had that question today about the availability of ammo. The shortage of ammunition is because of us. That's because we're buying it, because we're concerned. Freedom-loving Americans are going, and they're worried about whether they're going to have access to certain firearms or certain ammunition, and they're buying it. That's why the shelves, it's a supply and demand issue as far as I know. I did have one gentleman ask me a question today about ammunition shipments being held up at the port by customs officials or others. We're going to look into that. I don't have an answer to that, but I'm glad he brought that to my attention, and we'll make that inquiry about that, and I'll get back to folks on that. We'll probably put something on our website. But I believe it is a supply and demand issue. Our demand is great, and we're buying everything we can. If you got any 22 ammo, I'd love to have some. So the manufacturers can't catch up. It's kind of like PMags and other things. The demand has been so great that the availability isn't there. Supply and demand issue. Yes, sir. Buck?
This is a little different, but the people that Obama has appointed illegally, will their laws be upheld?
With NLRB recess appointments? Well, there's a constitutional check and balances system where branches of the government have checks on other branches of government. And the judicial branch stepped up to the plate and said he violated his constitutional powers by doing a recess appointment. I was glad to see the judicial branch use their power of check and balances on the administration. Now, the question I had today from someone is Congress, is the legislative branch going to do anything with regard to that overreach by the administration with regard to recess appointments? I'm not sure. That just happened. The judicial action just happened this week. And what I think we'll see is that appeal to the Supreme Court. And what we may do on the legislative side is just waiting to see how the Supreme Court rules on that. Because it still has an appeal process all the way to the highest court. And so we'll see what happens there. That's what I believe my leadership's going to say when I go ask them that same question. They're going to say, this is going to go through the judicial process. The Supreme Court's going to hear this case, and we'll see how they act before we take action to push back on that issue. But I will tell you this. I was one that went up to Washington when we weren't in session, a day like today, flew up there to make sure that we stayed in session, to act as speaker, gavel us in, take care of a little business, and gavel us out so we'd have a pro forma session. A lot of the freshman members that believe the way a lot of folks in this room do, we took the initiative to encourage our leadership not to go out of session, to stay in session, and we would agree to go up there and preside, which I did once or twice. So, yes, sir.